And so I just thought like, okay, maybe even an illustration shouldn't be valued independently of the context that it's created in, the person who's creating it, their story, their languaging of it. Because if you add all that, the radical contextualization of anything, suddenly it becomes a lot more difficult to evaluate. It's not just like, I'm just like gauging that this person isn't very skilled at, like drawing this anatomy here. No, that's not what it's about. If you take their whole entire story and context, you take a step back a bit and you evaluate the life that is lived at this particular time for that person to reach this moment and look at whatever they're doing in terms of that context, almost anything's beautiful. Probably everything is beautiful.
That's Misha Kleider, and this is The Stories That Brought You Here, a podcast dedicated to the stories of the people living in and around the Salish Sea. I'm your host, Chris Wakaluk. Well, we got a bit of a different one here for you today, ladies and gentlemen, because this interview did not go the way I was expecting, and that is because of Misha. We veered off into all sorts of amazing directions because Misha actually flipped the questions back on me a number of times, and we had such an interesting back and forth conversation. We started off by talking about his time working and living in Africa in his 20s, and from there touched on subjects like romantic love, movies, art, beauty, and so much more. It was philosophical, it was candid, and it was pretty unique. So stay tuned for that, but before we get started, if you've ever considered recording your own or a family member's life story, but put it off because you're not sure how to do it, this could be of interest to you. In 2019, I began working privately with individuals to capture their personal history and preserve it for current and future family members to enjoy. Recording the stories from your life provides a snapshot of unique experiences, values, and family history. Interestingly, though, what I've come to learn from recording people's memoirs is that it's not just the stories that we tell that are of importance, but it's also the way that stories are told that hold deep meaning. Stories we tell, of course, capture our accomplishments and the things we have done in our lives. But hearing those stories told in someone's own voice, that's when we're really able to get a deep sense of who someone truly is. The process involved in creating an audio memoir begins with preliminary interviews so we can become acquainted. I've found it deeply important to spend a significant amount of time with people to build rapport and also to work at discovering what parts of a person's life they would like to share. This time also allows me an opportunity to ask questions to get a deeper understanding of why particular stories are meaningful, to draw out more nuanced and specific information when we record. Next comes the recording process. Using professional recording equipment to record in the comfort of your own home, we can spend the time necessary to really cover all the areas of your life that you would like your loved ones to hear. Lastly comes the editing phase. Using creative editing techniques, I can help to create a crisp, easy to listen to, flowing narrative that can be enjoyed for many generations to come. The entire recording will be in your own voice, just as you would find in a written biography or memoir. If you're at all interested in the service or have any questions, there's a couple of different ways to get a hold of me. You can text me at 250-857-3091. That's 250-857-3091. And you can also reach me via email at myaudiomemoir@outlook.com. That's all one word, myaudiomemoir@outlook.com. You'll also find a link in the show notes that you can just click on and it will direct you to the email address. Something that I've come to learn over the years is that everyone has stories worth preserving. What are yours? All right, thank you so much for listening to that. So first a little bit of music, and then my interview with Misha Kleider.
Yeah, I was working in marketing in Vancouver, and a friend of mine, he was working as an aircraft engineer for a UN contractor in Africa, and he told me Misha, because he knew I was bored. I was like fresh out of university and doing this office job, and yeah, kind of tearing my own hair out. And he just said, I could probably get you I can at least get you an interview. he told me about the life there, and it sounded like an adventure, these living in these war-torn countries in Africa that I didn't know anything about, right? It just sounded just out of this world, and I was looking for that. So he lined up an interview with me, and that worked out real well. And then, 3 months later, I found myself, after doing all the training and stuff like that, I found myself there. And yeah, it was such a culture shock. Oh my goodness. I remember, in Hawaii, have you ever been to Hawaii?
I've never been, no.
It's just the humidity in the air, it immediately is just such a different habitat, so type different than what you're used to. And that was it. Like in Africa, same thing, but it was a different kind of humidity. It was, just the air was so rich. It was thick, and there's people singing everywhere all the time. You know what I mean? And we went to like a lot of places that, the hectic places we went to, like Congo. These are like very war-torn places. Congo, Sudan, North and South during the wars there, and Cote d'Ivoire during the Civil War there too. And they're not very well developed places in terms of like modern technology. And so they have these cultural artifacts from the past too, like singing is a part of everyday life, for example. And like construction workers sing, like that's what I mean. Like they do a lot of the same things, but they do it in such a different way. There's such a different vibe. And it's easy to fall in love with a culture that's as thick as that. Because I've only known our culture, which is technologically so rich, right? Our technological wizardry. I feel like that's maybe our crowning achievement. But socially, I think that we're much thinner than them, for sure. Like,
well, what else was going on culturally? Other like construction workers singing? That sounds awesome.
Yeah, they sing together and they work in tandem. So like they'll hit whatever it is, like boom upon the beat. You know what I mean? If they're hammering. I mean, I'm obviously generalizing. It doesn't work across the board like this, but you just notice these things that there's a rhythm, a syncopation to life that is vocalized. That we just don't have here. Everything is, even the English language itself, doesn't seem like it's as flowy and rhythmic as the languages they use. I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe our usage of it is less flowy.
Yeah, maybe Black Americans or whatever it is, and like, places they grew up, maybe I feel like that's actually true. It does have more of a rhythm.
Interesting.
When they speak English.
Yeah. So Congo, you mentioned.
Congo was hectic. That was like maybe one of the most hectic places I've ever been, for sure. It was, I remember when I got in, I flew in. I've never been to Africa before. And most people, when they go to Africa light. They go to Uganda, which has like so many of the rich cultural things going down, but there's no threat of violence. It's a very safe place, But with Congo, there is a constant threat of violence. And it's so beautiful though. Imagine a country that you take all the lightning from the rest of the world, like the cumulative amount of lightning in virtually every country, right? And you add it all up, right? What that equals is less than the amount of lightning that Congo has by itself. So it feels like you're on some moon of Jupiter. You know what I mean? Like there's just lightning storms like you've never seen. And I worked in aviation, so this is a very relevant feature. But yeah, at nighttime, just the skyline is just boom, 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 constant lightning storms. Like you can't, literally, greater than the accumulation, like I said, of the rest of the world combined. And so it's just out of this world, right? And such a place so full of like dark magic, it felt like too. Yeah. And there's so much violence there too. There's so much, like the threat of violence is always real. If you're a Mzungu like us and you're going into, to pay for something at the market or whatever it is, you got a 50% chance that some kid's going to come up to you and like, with a razor, he's going to slit your pant and take your money, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like it's high. You have to go with like an armed guard, typically, something like that, some UN guard when we would go, and even then they'll still do it. I got jumped so many times jump doesn't even have it's not the right word. Usually they don't want to hurt you. They will if you resist, but that's not what they want. They just want your stuff, So the cops actually are the ones that jump you most often. And they have their AK-47s and you just, okay, here you go. And they don't take all your money. They'll just take like 70% of it.
Wow.
So you have different money because you expect to get jumped. So you have different money in different places along your body. You know, you have like the money where you know it's high chance you're going to have to give this up. So you put the small money there, you know, and then you put the more money in like, you know, underneath, you know, like your sock and your shoe. Sometimes they'll do a thorough shakedown of you and then they take it all. But usually they just take a bit.
That's weird. So did you have a heightened sense of anxiety when you were there? Because if you've got lightning going off endlessly all night and then the threat of being mugged on a regular basis, were you fairly anxious while you were there?
Well, they also party hard. Parties are amazing. So there's like, I remember I was doing that in my 20s. So partying is so fun down there too. I remember that, like the clubs they have there, it was like really, it was. It's dangerous in certain places, but so much fun in others. You know, like it's so dangerous in the markets but of course you pick your market, and there's markets for kind of the wealthy people. You know, it's so classist in Africa. It's not like here where everyone from all the different classes hangs out together. We all go to True Value together. The broke people on Pender go to True Value. So do the rich people, right? I guess maybe there's some other options too, but generally, you know what I mean? Everyone kind of
shout out for Southridge over here.
That's it. But generally, you know, everyone shops at the same places and everyone goes to the Driftwoods for something. You know, it's not like that there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a place that rich people go. And by the way, we're rich there, in case that's not clear. And then the place where really poor people go, and never the twain shall meet. But except on the street, you're walking by them, but they don't have cars either. So there's like foot traffic's like crazy there, right? Like 99% of the people can't afford a vehicle transport. And for some reason, like bicycles are considered low status. So, so that's another big, like so many cultural differences, right? Like here you're on a bicycle, you don't feel low status. But in Africa, if you're riding a bike, it's almost like a statement. It's like there's a shame around it. Like, oh, you couldn't afford a car, so this is like some sad donkey you're on, you know? And anyway.
Was English rather prevalent?
French. French is very prevalent in all the places that I went, except Sudan. Yeah.
So what were you doing there exactly for the UN?
I was doing a job of a loadmaster. So you just do weight and balance on the plane. So you take into account like, how many people are on the plane and where they're going, how far the plane has to go, sort of thing. Take into account its fuel, and then also distributing weight throughout the plane as well for the flights. And then some flights as well, I did the job of flight attendant too, because you have to consider these aren't big airports. They don't have the same amount of task specialization along in these crews as we do here, where one person's a load master and then one person is a flight attendant. So I kind of did a lot of odd jobs. But really it's troop rotation. We were just flying troops, right? So there's no cabin service or water or anything like this. You do your safety announcements and then you sit down for the flight.
So you said a friend in Vancouver hooked you up with this job. Did you need any particular skills before you went over?
Yeah, I guess they wanted customer service. They wanted that you spoke a little bit of French because we were going to go to French-speaking Africa. I had ample supply of both. And and I guess generally you're an amicable person because you're living in a communal living situation. That's a big one. That's probably the biggest thing. How are you with other people? Do other people want to be your friend? Are you going to be super annoying? Do you know what I mean? Because that's going to make everything really tough, right? And of course, different people find different people annoying, but
it's true.
Yeah, right. One person's annoying person is another person's love of their lives. But yeah. So I guess they just tried to assess that during the interview, which is a strange thing to assess. But like, could I be this person's friend? I felt like that was the biggest question. Yeah, and it's true there. I had times. Most people have communal living when they're really young. You know, like maybe in college where you're living in dorms, and then that's it. And then maybe you have the odd roommate right after that or something. But other than that, then you're living with your partner, and then it's pretty isolated. But that's just how our culture works, I find. But that was a real trip because you're eating every meal all together. It's not like a roommate even where you just eat your own meals. Like everyone's eating all the meals together, and you get to know these people so well in this kind of relaxed place where it's not like you're making a friendship date to hang out with this other adult. You're just doing life together, you know? And I really miss that because I would become friends, really good friends with these people that I would typically never associate with. Just because, you know, probably our paths wouldn't cross, you know? And the things that I found that I thought would really matter, like, oh, they share my ecological concerns or whatever thing like this, you know, that didn't matter. It was these other things that mattered a lot more. Like, what's that person's vibe? You know, is that person a listener or are they going to talk at me the whole time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This kind of stuff mattered way more than like what their values were, interestingly enough. I didn't know that before. I thought values would trump that stuff, but no.
It's neat. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday about emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And the gentleman on the show was breaking down the three most important traits, cross-cultural traits that enhance relationships between people. And it was being non-judgmental towards someone, displaying compassion or empathy, and active listening. And that people feel seen and heard when those three things take place.
Yeah.
And so just relating to what you're saying, right? That the connections that you made with people, do you think those people had those traits?
Yeah, I think so. Do you think those things that you mentioned, you said active listening and then non-judgmental and then compassion?
Yeah.
Do you think those other two, compassion and being non-judgmental, are included in act? I feel like if you're a good listener, how well can you listen if you're being judgy? You know?
If you're waiting for all the juicy bits, you know, and you're like, oh.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I just feel like, it's all kind of falls. If someone's a really good listener, that means, and you said active listener as well, which means they're asking good questions too. And so, if you're doing that, I feel like can you do that without being compassionate? Can you do that without being non-judgmental?
That is a fantastic question. I did not consider that, but giving it some consideration right now, it seems likely that that's what you're doing by active listening. Just inherently, you're offering up those two other things.
I think so.
That's a really good point, Misha. Sincerely, that's a good one. Nice. But you're finding that you're connecting with these people. Were they from different countries?
They were all from Canada.
They're all from Canada.
Yeah, the crew that we worked on, it was a Canadian contractor for the UN. Okay.
And when you were in that living situation, were different people rotating out at different times, or did you all come in at the same time and leave at the same time?
We were rotating out, so it was 2 months on, 2 months off. And can you imagine how amazing that is? Because I won't digress. But so these people, they would come in, and sometimes they'd be at the start of your tour. You'd almost overlap the whole tour. But then sometimes halfway through your tour or whatever, everyone was kind of on there. It was random. But a lot of the times, you just do your whole tour with like the same crew for the most part. Sometimes it would be either two crews or the same crew for the most part. And so you really got to know everyone. And it turns out people are lovely. And maybe they just did an incredible job of sifting through the humans that they allowed into this group living situation. But everyone was really like amazing. Some people were truckers that became aircraft mechanics, and they brought that kind of world with them and that kind of like gruffness, and you know what I mean? But they're so lovely in their own way, and I love that kind of persona that's really kind of like maybe a little bit thorny on the outside, not a little bit crunchy on the outside, but soft on the inside. You have to get past that point where they recognize, oh, you're a friend, and then they're just like anyone.
Those people are great. I love those people too. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of light stepping around them to start off with, and you're like, oh, okay, you're a softie.
Right?
So 2 months off, what were you doing during the 2 months off?
So it was an amazing job because they would pay for wherever you want to go on your time off in the world, like for the travel.
Wow.
Right. So long as it was not more than it would cost to travel home. And it never was, because Africa to Canada is like the greatest distance. right? Especially to Vancouver. So there was anywhere in the world, it was basically free. They paid for it in terms of the flight.
Yeah.
So you could travel anywhere, and you had all this money now because we were paid really well. And I never had that in my life. I'd been a student, and then I worked at this like competitive marketing job where like you busted your tail, but they didn't compensate you with a ton of money for it, you know? And the promise was always, you'll work up the ladder and then you'll become a manager of the people you're managing, or, you know, a management of managers rather, like a regional, you know? Anyways, it was always kind of like money around the corner. Not yet. You're still in training, but this was like money now. It was the first time I had that. And, yeah. And it was really amazing. I would spend a lot of time Southeast Asia. Sometimes I would stay in Africa, but like the safer places in Africa, I fell in love with Africa. I almost got married to an African woman. Yeah, that I met down there, Yvonne. She wanted to come to Canada, so you know, I organized the citizenship piece. Oh my goodness, that was a trial. But yeah.
So you fell in love with Africa. How come?
The culture, Uganda in particular, has such a like. My goodness, for me, I hope this doesn't sound bad, but I just find if someone has a Ugandan accent, it sounds like just so adorable to me. First of all, it's a sing-songy way of being in the world. You know, like there's a rhythm and cadence to the way that they speak that's like, I don't know what. It just makes everything, it greases the wheels behind every social interaction.
Really?
Yeah, because it makes it a kind of like, there's such a rhythm. You don't even need to say anything. You know how birds are, and you wonder, like, is there semantic value to what they're saying? Are they saying like, hey, Jim, how was your day? Or is it just this, like, they're sharing a vibe, you know? And I feel like Ugandan is kind of like that. You know what I mean? Like there is no Ugandan language. I'm saying this because I know the listeners don't know all the different tribes, but yeah, there's like 50 different languages spoken in all these countries. It's like us with the Coast Salish peoples. Do you know what I mean? There's like so many different languages here. And the same is true of them, right? All the different tribes have their own languages. But the one that my partner spoke, it was just incredible.
Were you able to pick up some of the language while you were there?
No. The French I got. French was relatively easy because there's so much in common with English, right? But when it came to like my partner's language, mind you, she spoke English and her whole family spoke English, you know, even in the village, right? And so it was like they would want to practice their English, you know? So like I learned a few things like that I've forgotten now, but yeah, for the most part, they were happy to speak English, so it was okay. If I had stayed down there like permanently, like been living down there, I would need to learn it.
Yeah. I'm just having a flashback from the past of working with two gentlemen from Uganda, and I haven't thought about these guys in years.
Yeah.
And just as you were speaking, they popped back into my mind. But the thing that stands out to me when you talked about a sing-songy way of communicating,
yeah,
I can kind of remember that. But what really stands out is just a lot of laughter and smiling.
These people laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's because of the way they communicate. I think it has to do with the fact that there's so much song in their languaging that it kind of just like the vibe is so much more playful.
Mm.
You know, the vibe isn't about fitting this communication piece into the sentence. That's our vibe. You know what I mean? That's like that's how English speakers from Canada roll, right?
Yeah.
But they're not about that. They're kind of like, they have these sounds, right? Where they don't even try to communicate anything but a vibe in the sound. So like that, like that's a thing that they do, right? Or you know what I mean? Like all these different things. I can't do it very well. My ex would be like, that is not how to do it. I'll show you how to do it. But yeah, and so much is communicated with that. So it's just like literally a tone.
Yeah.
Right? And you get it. And so but it makes the whole interaction so much, it adds a kind of dynamism and playfulness to the whole communication with someone that I think in English we just don't have. Someone's making these noises. You're kind of like, what is going on here?
I'm totally remembering the guys I worked with doing the same thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh,
Definitely.
yeah. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. How we lost that? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I would assume that our indigeneity had it maybe before the Romans conquered us and made us civilized by their definition. And I don't know the whole linguistic story of how we came to be here in this room, but
so 2 months on, 2 months off. How long did you do this for?
I did that for about 5 years.
5 years.
5 years. Then I busted. I would have never quit. I'd be doing it now, but I busted my knee, and then I couldn't stand. Couldn't stand for 3 years.
What?
Yeah, I was like pretty much bedridden. I could stand a little bit, but for like 5 minutes, and then I had to have my leg up again. Otherwise, the piercing pain would just be overwhelming. Doctors couldn't tell me what it is. 3 surgeries later, they still couldn't tell me what it was.
There was no trauma?
There was an initial trauma. There was like a meniscus repair surgery that I had.
Okay.
And then I never recovered. And usually that's something that people are walking out of like 4 hours later. They're walking again in a stiff way, but then in a week they're fine. For me, I never recovered. It took so long. Even now, I'm limited in what I can do. Obviously, because of all the strength training I do, I can still hike mountains. So the limitation is like, most people wouldn't even notice it as a limitation. But to be honest, I'd like to go on like month-long treks. I can't do that. I would love to go on month-long treks into the mountains. But so I'm still, there's limitations, but compared to what they used to be, like I'm walking, I'm hiking, I'm happy.
Yeah. So what were you doing for those 3 years when you could barely even stand?
Going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. I was going crazy because I went from just like young and having all this virulent young man, in early 30s to like this cripple, that couldn't get out of bed for years. And just everything, my whole identity of who I was, who I wanted to be, it collapsed. And it was difficult. It was very difficult.
That's brutal, man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Lost my job, lost like all the pieces in my life that made it like a life, it felt like. I had my family and my friends still. But even my friends are very active. We all did things together. I didn't have the friends that kind of hang out at the coffee shop together.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all went on hikes or adventures, surfing or whatever it was, And suddenly when they would hang out with me, now we have to watch a movie or something. We have to do something like lugubrious, some sedentary activity,
Mm-hmm.
This is not what I wanted or them, really. This is not what they signed up for when they became my friends like 20 years ago. But they suffered. They suffered with me a bit, but it was still difficult.
So were you able to work at all during this time? Or?
Yeah, I got into web design. So I lost that job with the UN because it required standing and moving around, And then I was stuck basically in Vancouver, and I just really got into what can I do? So I got a master's in outdoor education because I was always hopeful that I'd be able to walk again.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
Yeah, so I kind of got this master's in this thing that required me to walk, and I figured, by the time I'm done this degree, I'll be able to walk. And all the doctors were being like, yeah, you should be able to walk. Like, it's going to happen around the corner. Like, it's okay, And of course it didn't. It still took long. So I got my master's and I couldn't use it because I was still like bedridden. But then I got into, just web design to pay the bills.
Okay. What year are we in roughly right now?
That was maybe that was when I was about like 35 or something like that at that point. Yeah. And then basically Pender happened, right? And then I experimented with living on Pender for like a couple months. And then met someone as well, met Crystal. And that was wonderful. And then the pandemic happened. We moved back to her place in East Van. She's living at a place there. And it just looked like such a hellscape during the pandemic. I remember that. It looked like such like a zombie nightmare situation. Because we were living in Gastown, where Gastown becomes Slumtown.
Mm-hmm.
That like hard to define distinction between like where all the rich people go shopping and like where like severely drug addicted people are doing like the crack addict jig, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that we were right on the edge there. And I just remember like when the pandemic hit, looking around, the tent city just went crazy. Suddenly there were just tents in the middle of all the sidewalks, and all the people that were severely drug addicted didn't care about social distancing. Obviously, like they'll do anything to get their next fix. They don't care about some government mandated protocol,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just being on the bus in that situation with like people coughing on me and stuff like this. And I was just like big human turds on the sidewalk right before our house. I was just like, oh my goodness, we got to get out of here. So we left to come here, and it was beautiful here. And you hardly knew that the pandemic existed because no one told the ravens or the whales.
Yep. They were
Right?
just doing their thing. They just kept doing what they always did.
Exactly.
Everything seemed normal.
Yeah.
Right? The birds were chirping along just as I always did.
Right?
Yeah.
And you went from this environment that was like such a wasteland, ghostly wasteland of social misery and the stink of it, right? Such an awful thing, stink too, because I feel like stench, what does it do? It turns down the volume on compassion. Disgust, the emotion of disgust. You know, when you're smelling something foul or whatever it is, and you just like recoil in disgust.
Yeah.
That's not a compassionate place, right? There's something about that like shuts down compassion, you know? And yeah, we were in like that place that we lived around, that neighborhood. It was just so filthy, right? It was so disgusting during that time that I didn't feel, my heart was not open to these people that are suffering that were around me. You know, it's funny now that I lived here, right? My heart is open again. When I go and I see like homeless people in Vancouver, it's upsetting. And I was like, this was not upsetting before. This was gross. Now I actually find it upsetting again, which is a healthier perspective when your fellow human is writhing around in agony.
Yeah, well, at the time too, I was just talking to somebody about this today, and I was saying we've gone through this collective trauma, and I think a lot of us, myself included, feel a little numb still from that time, just as a coping mechanism. And she replied with, "At least we were in the best place you could possibly be." Pender was pretty great, right? So the scene you're describing sounds awful, obviously, in comparison, right?
Yeah, it was truly awful. Yeah, my heart was closed. I was just kind of grossed out, and then you come here and it's just like beautiful. The wind is fresh, you know, everything is just lovely. And then there's some like social distancing, you know, that we did, whatever. Here it's so, ecology is so much more at the forefront of your experience than it is in the city, you know, with the rich habitat we get to live in here.
Yeah.
That it was just, okay, you just spend some time with the trees. Yeah.
I saw so many more people walking during that time as well, too, because I'm a regular walker, enjoy it. And then it sort of stood out to me how many more people were out and about walking. I was like, oh, I haven't seen as many people out walking because, you know, being cooped up in your house and realizing, oh, nature's just right outside. And even just walking through the neighborhoods in Magic Lake, it's pretty great.
Yeah. How did you find that time, though? It was traumatic for you?
Yeah.
It was?
Yeah. Totally. I think just the regular news feed that was happening day in, day out was just really difficult on the nervous system. Like a regular update on, you know, this is the amount of new cases of COVID in BC today, this amount of deaths, and it just was endless and nonstop. And I think that when I turned away from the computer screen, I felt as if nature was the most reliable and truthful place to be in. Yeah. But as soon as go back to seeing what was happening, and I'm talking specifically around the first lockdown phase of March and April, around there in May, and when all businesses were shut down, and you know, the only essential services were open, right?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember when it first happened, we didn't know like the mortality rate of the virus. Like I can't remember what it turned out to be, like less than, I don't know. But I thought it was going to, like, just when it first hit, I thought it was going to be like, I don't know, Ebola level or something. You know, I thought it was going to have like a 60% mortality rate or something crazy, right? I didn't know. And people didn't know at that point what it was, right? Yeah. And so everyone was, but the feel was like, whoa, this is coming. It's so like, it's going to wipe us out, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was just, anyway, kind of in the end, it worked out very differently.
It did.
Yeah.
So you're doing web design and you're living on Pender Island in, is it 2020 we're at pretty much right now?
Yeah. So I was doing web design here on Pender. And this is 2020.
Yeah, were you into web design, or is it something that just
I was always really interested in I love making things beautiful, you know. I love looking at them and kind of dialing in an aesthetic. You do too. I see your place. You know?
That's mostly Geneva.
Okay. Well, yeah, she has that then. And
She does, definitely.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love that. That's something it's a fun thing to do.
What is it about making things beautiful? What is going on there?
Because why else are we here?
Why else are we here?
Yeah, I don't know. What
Yeah.
else do you want to do with your time?
Well, some people I think like making things efficient. Some
Oh, yeah.
people like making things that are high performance, right? Some people like making
Yeah.
things, whatever it may be, right? But
Yeah.
but beauty.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I mean, there's something about finding something beautiful. It's so captivating. There's gravity around it. It's like you go from this thing that has no gravitational pull and you turn it into a black hole if you pump enough beauty into it. You make it so that literally it just like sucks things in, right? And it doesn't matter what you do. It's with your own body, you can do it. You can do it with, your own garden, your own house, whatever, It can take so many forms. People love to do it with their cars, they like to trick out their cars or whatever it is. And I mean, yeah, and it's interesting too, because not everybody falls into the same gravitational pull of an aesthetic, right? Some people are like, I don't like that. While other people are like, oh, that's awesome. That's got me. It hooks me. So there's a different hook for everyone. There's no one size fits all solution, but yeah, it's like you're just increasing something's gravity, I guess. You're just, for me, when I do it, I have a hard time. It was actually a difficult job for me in a way, because I have my own idea about what looks cool. And of course, not everyone agrees with that, right? And it's subjective. And so when I was building websites, I was building them for other people. It was a job. And so, I would make it to the best of my ability. And then people be like, no, we need like a bunch of more utility functions here, whatever it is, and I'm just like, it's so perfect. It looks nice like this. But it's a job, right? And so it's whatever they want comes first, right? But I always found that it was a bit like when you find something beautiful, you create something beautiful, and then someone's like makes it, in your view, unbeautiful by virtue of their needs, right? Which need to be prioritized. It's almost just like, don't get attached to this, And so then so then I started building websites and I wouldn't get attached. I'm just like, because that happens enough times. That happens 50 times. And you're just like, okay, this is just this thing that happens now, right? So don't get attached to this standard of aesthetic or whatever. But then I stopped taking pride in it. So it's a weird thing. So then it's like, well, then if I don't take pride in it, I can easily not care and distance myself from something, but then I don't invest, And so that was a weird thing. And then when that became, I never really figured out how to handle that. And so I'm like, this isn't the profession for me. So, yeah, the girl that I'm seeing right now, woman that I'm seeing right now, she's an interior designer, and she loves people so much that it trumps her own standard of aesthetics. She just wants to make people happy. Whatever they want's fine. And I'm like, but don't you want, when you design the layouts of these homes and stuff like that, don't you kind of want it to go one way rather than another? Even in your own mind, like you're hoping they choose this option, not this option. She's like, no. And I'm like, really? Like, really no? And she's like, yeah, no. And I can't imagine that. I can't. That's not the way my brain works. I want to create it beautiful to me, but her perspective is the better one to make money, obviously. No, there's no argument here. That is more functional in this as a job, to have that perspective of just like, I care so much about the other person too. It's not like, I'm just using this person as like a means to an ends to achieve my standard of beauty, right? But it's like, I want that person to ultimately, if I'm to be honest, I want that person to be persuaded of my subjective standard of beauty, because that's the one I see the world through. It's the only one I have. Do you know what I mean? And so always kind of like, having to relinquish that, I found difficult.
I can understand why that'd be difficult to relinquish. And I was just thinking while you were speaking that maybe there's a obtaining of beauty within someone's reaction to the work that the woman you're seeing right now does, that maybe the beauty that she registers is the beauty coming from the reaction of the client for the work that she's doing. So maybe that's what she's seeking, or maybe not, I don't know, right? But it's like that's what fills her, is the reaction within the individual and their beauty.
That is such a poetic response. I love that.
I read this book a little while ago by John O'Donohue.
Yeah.
Who is he died a while ago. He was an Irish poet and a former priest, if I remember correctly. But anyway, for people listening, and yourself, if you're into it, one of the best podcast episodes I've ever heard, ever, is him being interviewed on a show called On Being, like Human Being, On Being, and anyway, he was a very lyrical speaker, poet, but he wrote a book called On Beauty. Chapter after chapter after chapter of different concepts of beauty.
Oh my gosh, I need to read this.
I'll lend it to you.
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay, don't forget.
I won't.
I won't forget either, so we'll make it happen.
And so I love the concept of beauty. Having read this book more than once, actually, I love what you're saying about beauty, because I'm just reflecting as we're speaking that I'm not necessarily really on the lookout for it or really putting my creative efforts towards beauty right now. But when I was fresh off of reading this book for a couple times, it was totally in the forefront of my mind. It was such a beautiful headspace to be in, right? But it sounds like you're in that headspace quite often.
Yeah, I am. That's true. Maybe to my detriment. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I guess there's, like you said, right? There's so many tunnels that you can go down in your, celebration of beauty. It doesn't have to just be, can be someone's light, like you were saying. You know what I mean? I had, like a relative of mine. He has such sad eyes. He has these all these crow's feet around his eyes, and I find them so beautiful. I find them like it would be such a sad thing if they were to just like oil of Olay were to get rid of these, or whatever. Like it's weird the things that you can find beauty in. You can find it I think you can find it anywhere. You can truly find it anywhere. And that's why it is so, and I recognize, like, I'm fully aware it's subjective. Like these standards of beauty that I have, that like my clients, when I was doing the web design, they had different ones. Like mine's not right. I never believed that I could make an argument that showed that I was right. Right. It was just that was the world that I live in. That's all. Right. And I want them to share that world. Right. Or, I could share theirs, and sometimes, there was one client that actually did like persuade me to kind of see things from the lens of their perspective in terms of their standards. Right. And that was delightful. But you got to persuade me or I got to persuade you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, again, not great for business, but yeah.
Oh, it sounds, no, I love it. I think it's really interesting. Like these concepts that you're bringing up are really curious and great to explore. And then just sort of going back and forth with somebody about the persuasion idea, right? And the negotiating, and it's nice. It's nice. I kind of like the feeling of having that friction and then recognizing that, oh, wow, there's something I just didn't see that this person was trying to communicate to me.
Yeah.
And when I do see it, I think, there we go.
Yeah.
And then this whole other world, maybe not a whole other world, but something new gets revealed.
My brother, he's an illustrator, incredibly skilled illustrator, like understands human anatomy so well, right? Like his life drawing illustrations of people are just like next level in terms of his skill level. And growing up with him being, your older brother's always cool. For me anyway, my older brother's always way cooler than me. He's doing the thing that I ought to be doing. Whatever his interests are, I ought to kind of follow that. And like there's, he anoints the world with like significance by virtue of his awareness resting on a certain place.
Well said.
And so I'm always running after him, and his interests. And so he's always a leader. And he kind of valued art for its product based, like the outcome based aesthetic of an art piece. That's what's valuable. So like the outcome, look at this, right? Who cares what went into it? Blood, sweat, and tears. Maybe the guy fought with his wife the whole time, but look what you created. There's a gorgeous piece here, and that's what ought to be valued, right? And then I met this other, really became enamored by this other artist who was just so process driven, right? And up until that point, I should say, I agreed with my brother, right? It was just, I just cared about product. It was something looked like it was incredibly skillful. If it was, the composition was really well done, you know what I mean? It was, that's what would captivate me. And then I met this other artist that was so process driven. Her art, the product that she would create, much less skilled than my brother in terms of like, I don't know, pretty much on every level, right? But her process was so much more poetic. I don't know how else to say it, right? It was just, it's not about the product. It's about the journey, right? And for me, when it came to art, I was like, no, it's about the product. You know what I mean? And for her, it was just so much about the journey. But I went on a few of those journeys with her, and it changed my perspective completely. So that I just find like her work so inspiring now. Just like what you're saying, you have these experiences that open up your eyes, and yeah.
Well, could you explain more? What was the journey that she would go on to produce her art?
She was someone that just interpreted life very poetically, like constantly. Like poetry wasn't something that you did on a Saturday afternoon when you have some time and it's quiet and you got a pen and the fire's, roaring. It's just every day she would just like, when she would speak in poetry, right? It was just a gift that she had, right? And when she would do art, she would basically like talk aloud like what she was doing, the narrative that she was, the storied experience that she was trying to share and everything like this. And these, like the artifacts, like her languaging, right, was so pivotal to the physical artifact that she was creating. Like to make sense of it, you wouldn't want to just look at it in isolation from her talking about it, right? But I mean, she could talk about anything and it would make it magic. She's just one of these people that had that crazy gift on a level that I've never. Do you listen to Alan Watts ever? Are you familiar?
Oh, absolutely. Love Alan Watts.
That level, okay. Right? Where you're just like, okay, this guy can, with language, this person can make anything magic. They can give you an interpretation of anything, any artifact, right? And they can make it so otherworldly and magical. But you have to hear them do that. If you just have the artifact that they create, Alan Watts created like a painting and gave it to you, probably wouldn't be anything to raise an eyebrow at. But if he explained his process and what he was going for and stuff like this, suddenly it would be an out of this world experience. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
And that was just her. And so I just thought like, okay, maybe even an illustration shouldn't be valued independently of the context that it's created in, the person who's creating it, their story, their languaging of it, Because if you add all that, the radical contextualization of anything, right? Suddenly it becomes a lot more difficult to evaluate. It's not just like, I'm just like gauging that this person isn't very skilled at, like drawing this anatomy here. No, that's not what it's about. Suddenly it's about a life, this person, and maybe they went through Lord knows everyone has gone through trauma, right? And everyone's dealing with their trauma in different ways. And maybe this is that person's expression of some harrowing experience that they underwent, And even if they suck at what they're doing, like on a skill level, do you know what I mean? Like they're low skilled at it, right? It doesn't matter because their story is so captivating, Yeah, people can suck at like, fixing a car or something like this or whatever it is, or doing or drawing the human anatomy accurately, whatever it is, right? But if you take their whole entire story and context, you take a step back a bit, right? And you evaluate the life that is lived, at this particular time for that person to reach this moment, right? And look at whatever they're doing in terms of that context. Almost anything's beautiful. Probably everything is beautiful and sad and horrifying and the whole thing, but it's captivating. It will be a captivating story,
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, she opened up the world to me. That's what she did. She's just like an art piece is not just an artifact. It's the world. It's like a key to the world, you know? And you look at this and the world opens up, right? You just have to be open to it. And then I guess it's a lot more difficult to be an art critic suddenly. You know, when
yeah,
you have
complicates things for sure.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Well, it was super interesting, right? Because I think that in our lives, most of us are far more focused on the results or the outcome versus the process. Yeah. And you know what you're describing about her process is the word that you used to start off with. It sounds so fascinating and so lovely. And I think that in rudimentary ways, of course, with people making videos now about, oh, here's this really elaborate piece of art or drawing that I did, and let me walk you through this sped up process of the days or the weeks or the months it took to make this. And we get to see on this two-dimensional level pretty basic interpretation of what you're explaining, but it sounds as if it's so much more soulful as to what you were shown by this person that really drew you in.
Yeah. Well, you like the example I gave of like Alan Watts, you know, being just that incredibly talented and eloquent orator.
Yeah.
She has that, but it's not like Alan Watts he has such a playful way of speaking, but it's also like so rational. Whereas like her way of speaking was so deeply emotional, right? And even more poetic. I shouldn't say more or less. I mean, it's Alan Watts. But when someone has a superpower like that, then they open up your eye to like a different way of being, at least for me, right? And so now I see it in other people that are far less gifted in that way.
How do you see it in other people?
Well, just that. I'm like, okay, so their art is like a key. If we're still talking about art specifically,
yeah.
But yeah, it's a key to them, you know, and it's an kind of use this thing, evaluate it in terms of, you know, maybe seeing, lending you an intimate perspective on that person as opposed to checking out their art. Do you know? And so she gave me that structure with which to evaluate art, right? And so even though, you know, I've never met anyone as talented an orator as she, but I still have that perspective now, that framework with which to evaluate art. And I think it's just, by definition, it's so much more expansive. It's so much more rich. It's complicated, you know? Yeah.
Well, how do you do that? If you walk into a gallery, for instance, and you see paintings on the wall, how are you able to see beyond just what is in front of you?
Yeah, and to be honest, for that reason, maybe there is a way of doing that. You could look for clues in a kind of like, I don't know, a detective way. But I'm really more interested in the art of people that I know as a result. You know, and then I see it. Then I can, you know, I see where they're at. Even my friend, I know someone that really likes to do a lot of comics, you know, and they're like hyper violent. And I'm not really, it's not my jam. But I kind of see things. I used to kind of be dismissive and all the rest of it, you know. I have kind of a castigating review of his stuff, but now I kind of see like, oh, okay, this is kind of a broken bird, you know. I think they struggle with still kind of a residual toxic masculinity that's born of you know, them inculcated in a high school that I went to as well, where that was what it was to be, where the definition of being a man was, it had a lot of violence in it, you know? It had a lot of these themes that I guess are still championed in his work. And instead of me kind of being like very judgmental about it and putting it down, it makes me more fascinated with his stuff now, you know? Because I just see this person struggling with this kind of outdated, antiquated concept of what it is to be a man, and but I'm noticing too that his work is kind of like veering away from that too now, and so I see the evolution of this person through his work, you know, and yeah, I mean, each comic is different, and there's a lot to comment on in each one, but yeah, so It's really helpful though when you know the person and you share that experience. If I didn't share that I didn't go to high school with this person, I didn't have these other like experiential touchstones in common,
Mhm.
it'd be a lot easier for me to look at this stuff and just, come up with some put down comment. But instead I just see it as, yeah, this is this fellow broken bird, and this is this person's struggle, and there's beauty in it too. It's not just toxic masculinity. It's a lot of other things. Yeah.
I'm loving what you're talking about here. It's really neat because I feel as if we allow ourselves the opportunity just to spend some time really contemplating in different levels, challenge ourselves to really think about the art that we're digesting and to really sit with it, and rather than just be really reactionary and or dismissive if there's something we don't like, just to really contemplate it. So when Jennifer and I watch movies together, of course we're going to talk about it after we're done, but the longer the conversation goes, the more interesting it gets, right? And I think that we have the ability to do that just sitting in silence, contemplating something we listened to or something we saw or whatever.
What's the last good movie you saw?
I think it was called Fallen Leaves. No.
You strike me as a man that would watch a movie called Fallen Leaves.
I was just deleting it from the computer the other day, but Past Lives, that's what it was called.
Okay.
And it was about a Korean man and a woman, and as children they knew each other growing up in Korea, and then she left to go to the United States and found love with a man from the United States, and they both grew up to be adults, and the Korean man came to visit her in the States. And it was shot so beautifully. There were so many amazing shots in this movie. I just loved the aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
But the complicated, subtle friendship / love story had so many layers to it, and it was really touching and was really sweet, and it was really beautiful, and for its simplicity, or like for its like perceived simplicity, was rather complex as well too. So yeah, that one, if I'm getting the name right, I think it's called Past Lives. Yeah. What about yourself?
I don't know, when you were talking about that, I became a bit reactive. I watched so many movies on romantic love, like the theme romantic love. What do you think about that as a theme? Is that a theme that you're still interested? What do you think about romantic love?
I like it. I feel like it's not exhausted itself yet.
No.
Yeah, that's a movie that presented it in a way I hadn't seen before, and I think because of the cultural element of it as well too.
Yeah.
That really aided in my appreciation of it, because I think that if it was just straight up Americana or North American / cultural storyline, I don't think I would have been as drawn to it. But I think that there's so many different ways of being in the world in terms of what culture you're part of, but then there's so many commonalities as well too, and to see like the crossover, the things that are different mixed with the things that are the same, I find really interesting, right? So foreign movies, I should watch more of them, quite honestly, because it's just really interesting to see, wow, this is a totally different culture that has a totally different language that do things somewhat differently, and yet these universal themes of romantic love like have a lot of things in common with what happens in North America.
Yeah. So what you said resonates with me. I'm always down for like a new take on romantic love or whatever. I just feel like I'm glad that you said that, actually, because I forget that the experience of romantic love has not been exhausted in its representation on film. But I've just had so much the American version of that expressed so many times, right? In so many different ways, but like it's all basically, what is it? It's making someone else your god. What is romantic love?
In general, what is romantic love?
Yeah.
Wow, what a question. What is romantic love?
What's it to you?
What's romantic love to me?
Yeah.
So Jennifer and I have been together for over 20 years, and we started out as friends for about 2.5 years before we tried to start a relationship, which has been really successful. And it's really evolved over time, that we've gone through lots of different stages, of course, the classic ups and downs. But I think romantic love for me is really rooted in friendship,
Yeah.
that it's so pivotal to our story, the foundation of 2.5 years of friendship without, any sort of hint of trying to get into a relationship at all. And that's provided such a amazing base for what's come afterwards. And growing with each other as well too, that as one person changes, there's this pull for the other one to kind of catch up or come along.
Yeah.
And it goes both ways.
Yeah.
And they're growing pains within those experiences. And so romantic love, those are some of the elements of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started a new relationship. It's been, I'm in it 4 months now almost. And so very much like head over heels in love, that beginner's love. And so it's just something I'm thinking about, and it's so nice, it's insane. Like I'm a crazy person for sure, but it's so nice to regard someone as having such significance, like a god. And I know that's not like the healthy perspective. I know in like therapy, they'd be like, this person's mortal and you're going to see that they're mortal. Then the disenchantment stage sets in, like, and wait for it. I get it. I've been through it enough times to know the routine, but, wow, what a trip this is. Yeah. This person is still human, you realize that they, have to do all the human things, but at the same time, the amount of significance that their life is wrapped in, my gosh, what a crazy perspective to have, things that normally I wouldn't care much about, right? Like, do you like that shirt? No, I don't like that shirt. Oh, I really like that shirt. Suddenly I'm like, okay, that shirt must be so amazing. I just didn't see the amazingness in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That thing where you're just like, yeah, this person, this weird kind of, at least this is how it works on me, right? I just have this faith that this person, not merely that they're different, right? No, we all have different perspectives and subjectivity and all that. No. It's not like that. It's like, no, this person knows. You know what I mean? It's almost like, it's a bit like guru and like a bit like they're a guru in a way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you realize they're not a guru. Like, well, maybe if anyone can be your guru, but this is a very fallible human. I don't have any delusions about that. But yeah, I just wonder, like, it kind of makes me wonder how much we're all looking for someone to, at least for me, looking for someone to show me the way. This life is so confusing, especially a secular life, where you don't have like some biblical authority to appeal to when you're facing difficult choices.
Yeah.
To have you put I feel like for me though, it's such a natural compulsion, right? To want to put my faith in someone, right? In something. Oh, it can't be the Bible. That's not whatever it is, the tradition I'm from. So instead, I feel like, and I feel like I find it in romantic love. And it's true, it doesn't last. There is the disenchantment stage, right? Where, you're just like, okay, this person's human. Now the real relationship begins and it's hard. You know what I mean? But there's like this 6-month window of delusion that I love. I'm in it right now, right? And it doesn't matter that I've gone through it like 5 times, right? It's still amazing. And the fact that I know how it ends doesn't change that I'm still in it. That's the amazing thing. It's like talking to you. So you glimpse genuine craziness.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Just because someone tells you, oh, you're going to, and from personal experience, like you won't always have this perspective. This is just what you do in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That doesn't change the fact that you're still in it, and you still see the world through this lens. And what a gift. I get how it gives me a window into like how people search for gurus so much and like want to kind of like give up the beauty in giving up your own agency and saying, I don't know best. This other source does. And just following that on faith.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's something so like in our individualist culture, obviously that's seen as like really negative, right? Makes you incredibly vulnerable to manipulation, obviously. But the actual subjective experience of doing that is wonderful. It can be wonderful. Lord knows if the person's taking advantage of you, it doesn't end wonderful, right? But yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It can be a really beautiful thing, paradoxically.
I was listening today to a podcast with a relationship therapist, Esther Perel.
I love her.
She's great.
Yeah, she's great.
This interview I heard on the Huberman Lab today was just amazing. And she was talking about research that either she or other people had done, but certainly through personal experience, through her practice, she found that when people were committing adulterous acts, having affairs, a very common reason as to why was because they felt alive within that experience. So what I'm hearing you say about starting a new relationship is that this sense of being alive. Right?
So alive.
But another interesting thing she mentioned as well too is that they were doing it not just to feel alive, but so they could find a new piece of themselves.
Yeah.
That having this new relationship, this new person, they were able to discover a new part of themselves that unlocked this new piece.
Yeah.
That wasn't aware that was there. And so I think same thing applies to a new relationship. This new piece of yourself gets unlocked by this other person that you're entangled with, right?
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that because the same reason this conversation is interesting that you and I are having right now, right? That we're like as human beings, we're meant to interact with each other, right? Yeah. And then when you find somebody that you really sync with, you just see different pieces of yourself come alive. I use the analogy actually, like hitting a tennis ball back and forth with somebody that's the same skill level. It's fun, right? Yeah. Like the word rhythm came up earlier, right? Mm-hmm. Versus hitting a tennis ball against a wall. Yeah, it's not that fun. Right? Yeah. It's kind of predictable and boring and gets like tiring very fast. But and then hitting a tennis ball back with somebody that's far more skilled than you or much less skilled than you, that's still not very fun. Yeah. But when you find somebody you sync up with, then you can sort of grow together a little bit. Like your skill levels can sort of match each other as you go, I think. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my answer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we probably overestimate the degree to which like our identities are comprised of character traits, and underestimate how much of our identity is really made up by the situation, So like we think like, I'm a really kind partner, because I'm good to this partner, the next relationship, you find yourself like grossly dysfunctional with that partner or whatever it is. Cause this person, I don't think people are good. I don't think people are bad. I think people get to be privileged with being good in certain situations. You put those same people in a really bad situation. Yeah. I shouldn't say I'm exaggerating, right? There is character, right? You learn to be generally an honest person or something like this, and that can stick with you through different situations till the Nazis come knocking at your door asking if you're hiding Jews, and you are. But you know what I mean? Like most of the time you can be an honest person and it can work for you in most situations. But there's some, it was interesting actually. The Ugandan woman that I was engaged to, her mother was just such a profoundly honest person. And she was so poor. Her mom was so poor, right? They weren't really that poor when we got together, but they went through a time in their lives where like things were rough. There was all kinds of things that happened to the family. And it was just really difficult. And she just told me though that like, even despite like in that kind of situation, when people get really desperate, that's when people start lying. Do you know what I mean? You don't need, if you're rich, what are you going to lie about? You don't need, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can still be a liar and be rich. Obviously, there's a lot of rich people that are liars, right? But it's probably a lot easier, right? If you don't need to, this is a bad example because a lot of rich people are full of BS. But I just feel like if you find yourself in an easy situation, you know, with like a partner that you're very compatible with, all these pieces, you know what I mean? It's easy to be a good person in that situation.
Mhm.
It's just easy.
Yeah.
Why would you be a bad person in that situation? Why would you lie? There's no incentive. You've organized your life in such a way that all the incentives point to like you being a good person and getting rewarded for it. So then it's easy. But then you find yourself suddenly in a situation where the incentives have changed, right? The incentives are now, okay, now being a good person is going to hurt, right? It's going to hurt over and over and over again. And when you find yourself in that kind of situation, the person that you thought you were gets really challenged, you know? And some people, I think they stick to it, you know? And you know, they stick to their guns. I guess they'd call that character, you know? And then they just like live a life of suffering, you know, for a long time, and they still remain, you know, they still have that, their sense of, you know, their morals and all the rest of it. But a lot of times people chuck that out the window at that point, you know, once life gets hard. And yeah. Anyway, dark days with Misha Kleider. I just got out of a really rough winter when I felt like I was tested, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was funny too, because I had like such an easy 4 years prior where it was just, everything was good. I remember going to therapy and not knowing what to talk to the therapist about. Because I actually, and I'm sure if you dig deep enough or maybe have the right insight, you can always find something. But I'm genuine. I'm just being straight up. I couldn't find anything. I didn't know what to talk to my therapist about.
Okay.
She's like, "What's your problem?" And I'm like, "I feel like I should go here because this is what like mature, self-developing adults do." But I couldn't actually come up. I was just on easy street. You know how life is like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then life hit hard, and then suddenly it was just. Yeah.
Well, what to do? What to do in the tough times? Like, what were some of the coping strategies?
I tried everything. My strategies I was suffering a lot, so I tried therapy, right? I maintained exercise and eating healthy. Thank God for that, you know. But like nothing really worked, you know. I shouldn't say that. I guess a lot of little pieces maybe worked, you know, 2% here, 3% there, but there was no panacea or panacea. Do you even know how to say that word?
I don't even know. I don't know what that word means.
A cure-all. Yeah, there was no silver bullet.
I'm going to look that up after you go. But,
yeah. Well, look up the pronunciation because that's the piece.
The definition for myself as well, too. Yeah. But so little bits here and there to help.
Yeah, nothing really. You know what I think did it? I think time. I think life just sucks for a while sometimes.
Yeah.
And you just got to, you know, it's going to be grim and you got to bear it. And then in time, it just gets better. It just starts to unwind. Yeah. Like the noose around your neck starts to unwind. And you're like, can breathe again. Okay. And then, you know, okay. This is okay. We're good. We're getting better. Okay. You know, but it takes time sometimes. Obviously depends on what it is. Therapy is incredible for like most people, I feel like, you know, in so many situations. But I think I just encountered a situation where it just, maybe I wasn't asking the right questions. Maybe, I don't know. But nothing seemed to work. I was trying all my health stuff because I think the problem, actually, if you can imagine the irony of this, was that I'm a bit health obsessed, right? Not into the drug use so much. I'll smoke weed once in a while, but we're talking like once every 2 weeks sort of thing, you know? I don't even drink. Maybe I'll drink alcohol like once every 2 months if my friends are having a gathering. Do you know what I mean? So I don't have these like, so I'm a bit obsessive about it, you know? Work out every day. I have my yoga, my meditation routine, all the pieces. And so maybe it's my religion, right? In a way, health is my religion. But then during this crisis that I had, you know, and I won't tell Pender about all the details, but I just went through this just really harrowing experience. Nothing, I guess the thing that added insult to injury is that I knew like I wasn't sleeping. That was a big piece, right? And so like I knew I was unhealthy, and I always feel good about being healthy, you know? And so now that I'm like, I'm trying all the things and I'm still unhealthy, right? And I'm thinking about like the effect of stress on my system and all the rest of it, of not sleeping on my system. It's just making it so much worse. It's just adding this other layer, this like this bludgeoning beat down layer to what's already this impossible situation, And so, yeah, I was just this thing of like, really valuing your health, which is normally such a really positive tool in life, right? Mm-hmm. Turns out in this situation, it was quite the opposite. I would have been much better served in this situation. I feel like had I been someone that was just like, whatever, I don't prioritize my health. And this is, because at the end, all these healthy, like I was saying, all like these healthy outlets that I have in my life, they didn't get me out of it. What got me out of it was time. And that's a weird one.
I think it's so relatable. I think that like all of us can relate to the idea of time being the answer to getting out of our difficult times, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's funny that like, that's you mentioned about like wealthy people just a few minutes ago, right? Like that money doesn't solve everything, right?
No, it really doesn't. You can't throw money at this. I was willing to throw as much money as was necessary at this. It wasn't a money issue. Yeah, it's true.
Well, it's interesting, like I think we all have people in our lives, obviously, that go through difficult times, right? Like I'm sure, myself and people listening right now probably know at least one person that's having a hard time right now. Like what's some advice if we're aware that somebody's going through a challenging time? What can we do to help support people? And I don't know the situation that you were in, but what would you have appreciated that maybe didn't come your way that you think would have been beneficial from someone in your life?
I was really lucky that I had a lot of people I could talk to about my suffering. I know that's not always the case, but yeah, I've been very fortunate that way. I don't have like superficial relationships with a bunch of guys that I hang out with at the bar or something like this. Do you know, when we talk sports together or whatever. Although I think that can be very healthy for some people, of course, but I just don't. All my friends that I have that are friends, we talk about the things that are difficult in our lives together. We share our joys too, but like that's a piece that I guess we've always appreciated about one another. So I've had that. And that was really helpful. I guess if I didn't have that, I would say that. But I did, and I had a lot of people that were really very patient, I guess. It's hard holding space for someone that's easy to hold space for someone that's going through a rough week. I mean, if you can't do that, you're not worthy of that person's friendship, I just feel like. But it's much more difficult to hold space for someone that's on month 4 in this dark place, stranded in their dark forest, and they can't find their way out. And now it's month 4. And the seasons have changed, We're so cyclical. We want people to change with the seasons. We don't want people to get stuck, And so when someone is stuck, I was stuck. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard on everyone around you.
Right.
Yeah. So it's I guess like that's the thing, right? Like when you're stuck, how do you get unstuck? You want to get unstuck real badly, you know? But it's you've got this glue, on your body, and yeah.
But you mentioned time earlier as being, a necessity in finding, your way to healing, and then in terms of relationships with other people, just being able to communicate and talk, and huge, huge,
totally. Love did it for me. That was love. That's
oh my gosh.
Cheesy. It's
There's
so
the
cheesy.
answer. Anybody having a hard time? Just go find some love.
That's right.
Yeah, just go.
But I was on. Okay, so dating when you live on Pender, when you're just a mess. Everyone always says the advice that they give. You should be in a good place. You should love yourself. This common narrative, right?
Yeah.
Wow, what a privilege that would have been. I would have liked to be in that place. I was just this like desperate, ragged shell of a man, and I'm dating in this place. But yeah, like I knew it though too. I didn't believe it. You know, that's a funny thing. Sometimes I just know bullshit, right? And obviously we're such social animals. We're like dogs, you know? And a dog is not better off by its own. When it's screwed up in the head, it doesn't go off into the corner by itself and like, you know, come to find a good place of self-love within before it interacts with other creatures. No, it goes to interact with other creatures, and that helps it get over its thing.
Totally. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like that. I'm like a dog, you know, just like a very social animal. I don't recover on my own. I need some solitude, of course, you know, but it's in communion with other people that I recover.
Yeah.
Right. And so I never heeded that advice. So, but anyways, it is difficult though. Let me tell you. So on Pender, so I'm dating now because, you know, I was 3 months on my own in this like horrible state. Right. So I'm like, okay, it's enough, you know? And it wasn't helping. I never came to some profound state of self-acceptance or anything like this. I was just ragged. Right. And then, but I'm like, okay, I don't think continuing this process of like solitude and loneliness is going to be good for me. So I'm like, I have to date, but I live on Pender. So who can I date on Pender? Like, where are all my prospects, you know,
Yeah.
my age group and all the rest of it. I'm a 43-year-old man. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll go online. So I went online. I went on the Bumble app, and yeah, that thing is amazing. So I can meet people. I met people from everywhere on that thing. People living in Victoria, Vancouver, wherever it is. They don't need to live on Pender, right? So suddenly you cast your net as far as, you know, this bioregion, basically, right? The Coast Sea, anyone along the Coast Salish Sea, I'll come meet you, right? And yeah, and then I met this person, and I went on like a couple dates, you know, that were okay. I never went on a bad date. You know, it's just like, oh, okay, but you could tell there wasn't magic, you know? And then I went on this one day. She actually came to Pender. And on a first date, I remember she brought all these gifts. Who brings gifts on a first date and coming all the way from Vancouver to visit me on a first date?
Yeah.
She doesn't know if I'm a psycho killer, right? All she knows about, well, we talked on the phone and stuff like this, right? But like, I always think like for women dating, right? So much more dangerous than men. The worst case scenario for us is that there's no connection, there's no fire, right? The worst case scenario for them is they wind up in some dude's cellar. You know what I mean? It's a different ball game. And so I'm always trying to prioritize like just making that person feel safe, right? But anyway, we talked about it back and forth. We had good rapport over the phone, and anyway, she came to meet me down here. It's the first date that actually went to come meet me on Pender for the first date, you know, because it's a long way to go. That's a big investment.
Sure is.
That's front loaded investment, right? And so usually with an investment that's this front loaded, someone's going to be self-conscious about this. I would be. If I go all the way to Vancouver to meet someone, I'm going to feel self-conscious about the amount of commitment I've done to just see them, right? And kind of try to downplay that in some self-conscious way. But she didn't at all. She like literally brought gifts in addition, like trying to make this event special and succeeding, you know. And I was just so touched by this person. And I was just, and she was just so courageous and right out of the gate with everything. Yeah. And so anyway, I fell in love with her very, you know, that happened fast.
So you get to make regular trips to Vancouver.
That's what I do every weekend now.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's not good for my business. My personal training business it's I mean, this is ghost season for me too, for personal training.
Yeah.
So everyone wants to basically everyone wants to have a personal trainer for the fall, the winter, and then they want to do their own thing in the summer generally. You know what I mean? Not always, but I lose about half my clients in the summer, right? So now I have, you know, people knocking on my door. They want more of me, but they want weekends, you know what I mean, to make it congruent with their schedule. And here I am taking off every weekend to Vancouver. But
you got to do it for love.
You got to do the things that you'll do for love, right?
A weekend trip to Vancouver. That's easy to do for love.
Right? I went to Hawaii last week.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Just got back.
Where'd you go in Hawaii?
I went to Oahu. Yeah,
Okay.
we rented a camper van and we just like toured the island. Yeah, it was not an expensive holiday. It was actually super cheap. It was,
What? How much was a camper van?
camper van was 500.
For the week?
Yeah, for 4 days,
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
you know?
Yeah.
And then the airfare was 500 too. So round trip, so $1,000 and then
Yeah.
food on top of that. So the whole thing was $1,500, which actually sounds like a lot of money, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was great.
For what you get. A
Yeah.
camper van, Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's it doesn't sound like a lot.
Right? From what I was expecting the bill to be, I was pleasantly surprised. And I'm so frugal. She makes way more money than me. So for me, I'm always just like, what's the cost? You know? And she's just like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's good. And it was. So
So it was a 4-day trip?
yeah.
You asked earlier if I'd been to Hawaii, and I said no, but man, people talk about Hawaii. You see pictures, you hear great stories. Nobody comes back from Hawaii and was like, it was awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you're going to hate it. Nope, never heard that. Was that your first time in Hawaii or?
No, the first time was actually, believe it or not, I lived homeless in Hawaii for, what was it? It was 1 month when I was about 19 or 20. So my friend and I went down. We were working at Kentucky Fried Chicken straight out of high school, making no money. And we had like such little money. I can't remember what the number that we had, but it was pitiful. And we're just like, we knew a girl from our high school that worked at the flight center. And she got us this crazy deal on tickets to Hawaii together. And we found out that if we went to Hawaii for a month, it would cost us at least an airfare the same as if we just went for a week. So like, of course we picked the month, right? But we had no money when we got down there. So we had to really hustle. We brought all these tuna cans to eat tuna. That was our plan. We're going to buy really cheap tuna in Canada, right? For like, what was it? 75 cents or something like that a can. We'll have 2 cans a day. And so we brought this huge backpack. This is before 9/11.
Clearly.
Right?
Yeah.
I remember going through customs, the whole thing's like, beep, and they just saw like all these cans of tuna. And they let us through. They would never let us through now with that. But yeah, they did. So we basically like, and I remember, we just lived like homeless in Hawaii for a month. And it was amazing. We lived in a tent, brought a tent down there. And you can tent on the beach. We found places where you're actually legally allowed to tent right beside the beach, with a lot of the Samoans that are like living homeless there, right? And so we just like planted our tent next to them. We heard like domestic violence things go down at night sometimes, but other than that, it was amazing. Yeah, so.
That sounds pretty special. Are you still friends with the guy to this day?
Yeah, I am. And he
Yeah.
goes down there to Hawaii now. He makes tons of money. So he goes down there, these lavish, like 5-star hotels. He goes with his wife and his kids down there now. And he just tells me it's just nowhere near as fun
Yeah.
as that homeless trip of me and him just tenting on the beach down there together.
Why is that? Why are those experiences that have the adversity within them?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
And though.
Well,
I'll ask you.
No,
You know.
no. Please tell me. Why is it?
Because when you're desperate, you have to come up with like, it's an adventure. It's not a happy one always, right? Because there's a real genuine struggle in it, and the wolf is at the door. And you can hear it scratching. It's trying to get in, and that thing wants to eat you. So the stakes are high. You got to survive. But that need to survive in a situation where you don't have anything, it puts you in all these situations that are very compromised, but also very memorable. And as humans, we're such storytellers. We don't remember days that were easy. We remember days that were difficult and crazy shit went down, right? And so for me and him, for that vacation we had, it was just one crazy thing happening after another. We ran out of tuna. So, anyway, I won't get into there's some compromising details, but yeah, like it was a genuine struggle, and we just had, it was just that. It was such a storied experience, Whereas when you have money, you eat well, you get to go to a nice beach. You're not doing, everything you're doing is perfectly congruent with what the culture wants you to do.
Yeah.
There's not much of a story there.
Yeah.
There's no story there. So.
That was a beautiful explanation, man. I really dug that.
Oh, good.
Seriously. No, you're so eloquent and articulate.
Oh, thank you.
And
I find you to be the same, by the way.
I appreciate it. I don't think I'm on your level though, Misha. It's so awesome talking to you. This has been fantastic.
I've enjoyed.
Seriously, like this is not what I was expecting at all, and this has been magical.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed myself.
Is there anything else you want to end off saying to finish up this podcast?
No. Thank you. Just a big thanks for you for honoring me with this opportunity. It's been really nice. You're such a great listener. You ask such great questions. It's a delight.
I'd like to give a huge thanks again to Misha for doing that interview, and thank you for showing up and listening to this to the very end. I've been getting some absolutely great feedback over the last few months about the podcast, and I haven't even been putting new episodes out very often at all. But thank you to all the people that have said that they enjoyed listening, and it's a real pleasure to get to do these interviews, and I had a great time with Misha. So thank you again to him, and thank you again to you for listening, and until next time.